Life's a bit different now, all right. Since the accident, I haven't been able to do a lot of things I used to. Playing footy, driving the car, going out with the mates isn't as much fun anymore. And my lady seems to have lost her appetite for a bit of fun. Before the accident, she could be pretty affectionate, but now... Oh, well, it's my own fault, I guess. If I hadn't ignored the barricade just as a wedge on the other end slipped. Still, could have been worse. There are enormous pressures at work here. This multi-wire stressing bed is capable of pulling up to 400 tons. And under normal operating conditions, if the safety rules are followed, there's very little risk of injury to the operators. But if those rules are ignored, well, we've already seen what happened to one bloke. With hundreds of safe stressing operations behind us, it's easy to think she'll be right and drop your guard. But that's just when disaster can strike. So let's go back to basics and look at the safe way to stress up. When we're really busy, it's easy enough to let the place get untidy. But those unnecessary things on the ground can be hazards. So the first step towards safe stressing is to clean up the work area. Give yourself plenty of room to move. Any leaks in the hydraulics should be reported so they can be repaired. Spilled oil should be cleaned up immediately. Step into a pool of oil like this and you could find yourself flat on your back and in lots of pain. Once you've got a clean and tidy working area, you can go ahead and run the strand out. But first, check that the strand matches the specification for the job. But don't count on it. Sharp edges on the ends of the strand can slice through flesh. And in this job, cut and saw hands are about as useful as a raincoat in a drought. Kinks and defects in the strand can be dangerous when the pressure goes on, so everyone should get into the habit of inspecting the strand on their way back to the coil. Barrels and wedges should have been checked and cleaned after the last job, but don't count on that either. Satisfy yourself that the wedges don't have worn or chipped teeth and the barrels are not bruised badly enough to be suspect. The barrels are lubricated with graphite powder to allow for easier stripping at the end of the de-stressing operation. It takes only a few seconds to make sure they're all okay. Of course, cutting strand, either with an oxy-torch or an abrasive cutter, has some hazards of its own. That wheel goes round at nearly 7,000 revs per minute, and there are likely to be bits of grit and metal flying off. They'll only sting if they strike bare skin, but they'll go right through an eyeball. So it's common sense to wear eye protection. With all the strands in place, it's time for another check. This time, taking in the strands and couplers to make sure they aren't fouled, the barrels and wedges to make sure they're seated properly, and the safety loops to make sure they're all in place. Check that the nose of the stressing jack is the correct size. You'll have enough to think about while you're stressing up without having to worry about other people wandering into danger areas around the job. So make sure your warning flags and flashing lights are in place. Make sure that your own protective screens are secure, and check that the plastic barrier chains are in place to prevent people walking behind the heads. If it's necessary, clear the spectators away. Make sure anyone who's not involved with the stressing isn't hanging around behind or alongside the job. And finally, see to it that everyone working on the stressing is wearing a safety helmet. With those safety precautions taken care of, you can start stressing. You should have a reliable operator watching the dead end for slippages, and if you're using couplers, another operator watching those to make sure they don't foul each other or the sides of the mould. All strands are pre-tensioned to around 1 ton to remove kinks and sags. Stop to check that all the strands are free and that all the barrels and wedges are secure. If they all check out, it's safe to continue. Because of the enormous loads imposed on the jacks, it's critical that they both extend at the same rate. If they don't, the crossheads will be twisted out of shape and we'll have a serious delay on our hands. Accurate pressure gauges are your eyes and ears at this stage. Any unusual changes in pressure are usually an indication that something's wrong, so you'll need to watch those gauges constantly. When you've completed stressing, you need to move quickly, but carefully, to install the packers and take the load off the rams. Then take the load off the jacks, because leaving them loaded up will damage them. Before you leave the job, make sure no one goes near it with a welder or oxyflame while the strands are stressed up. The job's now ready for the concrete to be cast. We'll come back tomorrow after the concrete's cured to watch a safe de-stressing. Good housekeeping is just as important during de-stressing as it was when the job was being set up. So, first up, remove any odd tools and rubbish and check to make sure nothing has been thrown into the stressing box. You don't want to have to worry about spectators, so clear the area of people who aren't involved and make sure that all your own guys are wearing their helmets. Then check that the hydraulic valves are closed and turn the hydraulic pumps on. Then pull up just enough load to free the packers. Remember, all of the packers must come free at the same time to avoid twisting the crossheads. With the packers out, it's simply a matter of easing open the relief valves to allow the jacks to evenly transfer the load to the job. The free strand is then cut. The barrels and wedges are removed and placed in a tray for cleaning. Once that's been done, you can relax. Just be sure to take the warning flags and barriers down when you leave the job. If you leave them up when they're not needed, people will get used to them and they'll soon be ignored. So here's a recap on the important points we've covered.